Welcome. Today's podcast is about pets. This is me, Avantika, and with me I have...
Hi, it's Faith.
Hi, this is Pat.
This is Mel.
Welcome, Mel.
Why is this topic interesting to me? Because this is what makes America so unique from the rest of the world's perspective, that pets in America, over 90% of pet owners in America consider them a family member. I went through some statistics specifically for the years 2018 to 2024, which covers the pandemic. And I have concentrated on the millennials for this statistics. We'll have the references to where we got this information from. It was pretty interesting that 60% of Americans own pets. Of them, those who've been never married, are from lower income, or live in urban areas. Over 60% of that demographic consider pets their family. And to me, it was really interesting that that is the common thread between these three various categories that, we wouldn't string together in any other way. So with that, I'm going to open up the discussion. The very first question I'm going to ask is, have you owned pets before or while you were growing up? And what are your fondest memories? We'll go around the table. We'll start with our new guest here, Mel.
So I grew up a little bit with pets. And I say that because their lives were quite short. We had goldfish who ended up, and we had like a big aquarium for them and everything, but they ended up getting sick and cannibalizing each other. Mm-hmm. And we had a very sick little farm puppy who was full of worms and died. Aww. So we didn't have a lot of pets that lived and that were like in our family photos or anything like that. And my experience of other people's dogs is that they were part of the family, but not in the same way as now. So my grandpa always had German Shepherds, but the German Shepherds would never have been allowed inside his home. They were outside with the cars.
Could you elaborate on that? Because our listeners don't have the context, but you grew up in Mississippi.
Yeah, I grew up in Mississippi. I grew up in Mississippi in the 90s. So I'm in between X and millennial.
Okay.
And my grandparents were I guess the World War II generation. Mm-hmm. And the idea is you might like dogs, but they're still dogs and they are unclean and they should not be allowed inside the home. So the idea of having a pet dog that you allowed inside your home was just not a thing that anyone would do.
You mentioned it was a farm puppy, so I'm assuming you were growing up at least in a homestead or a place where,
No, actually, I grew up in a suburb, but the entire state of Mississippi at the time only had 2 million people in it. So even the largest city was quite small compared to a New York or an LA or something like that. So, and even now it's still quite rural. Where I grew up, we were sort of the last, we were at the city limit. So beyond us was the county. And it was regular to see people riding on horseback and large pieces of land. The idea that you would have 3 different floors and each floor is a separate family was absurd to me.
Right.
So it's just very different because there's so much more space.
Plus weather's different.
Yes, it's much warmer, a lot more rain. And so, the dogs, in inclement weather, would, they would just be in a little dog shed, and Grandpa, loved the dogs, but he didn't love the dogs like he loved his grandchildren.
Right.
Right. So, and I think dogs in a rural place can take on jobs. Mm-hmm. Whether that's guard dogs, there are a lot of people who still had guard dogs. And if you like to hunt, sometimes you might take your dog with you hunting. It's just a much closer relationship to the natural world than in a place like Boston.
That's a very, very important distinction to make.
It's interesting, too, when you think about, you mentioned how there's a lot of space and it was more rural, where the contrast of New England is there are people shoved into tiny apartments, sneaking in other pets into their very confined spaces. And in these rural areas, I mean, at least at that time, the space was there and allotted for, but still pets were, they have their doghouse outside or they're meant to be working. So I think that's just a really interesting distinction, especially in that time too.
Certainly much larger and much more intuitive breeds. I wouldn't use the word aggressive, but they're intelligent dogs who are used to making decisions on their own. So, yeah.
Yeah, there's no pocket German Shepherd.
Oh, we should talk about dog intelligence at some point too, because you think about there are spectrums of intelligence with pets. I'll get to my history with pets in a moment, but I can tell you, smarter dogs don't always make the better dogs sometimes because, for lack of a better term, the dumb dogs will do what you need. If you give them commands and they learn them, they'll follow them. The smart dogs will question. They'll go, "You're calling me inside, but I don't want to go inside. So no, I'm going to stay here." Or, I know in that cabinet's a toy and I'd like it. If I just paw at it, it will open. So there comes some mischievousness.
Was that your favorite pet, the dumb one?
Oh, the thing is, I don't know if I've... you know what? I take that back. I have had dumb pets, but still, to jump in real quick, I have Rottweilers. I've grown up with Rottweilers.
Yes.
They're, I think, top 10 smartest breeds. So even my dumbest Rottweiler still had some brains to her. So, but I know we're going in an order too. I didn't know if people had more to contribute, like Pat and Mel, or if I have a plethora of dog facts.
No, I want to know about your most fond memory.
Let's see here. Most fond memory.
Fondest memory. I don't know where my English went.
I have no.
I know speak good English.
I speak English the goodest, I'll have you know. No, so I have a lot of fond memories. Over my years of existence, I've had 10 Rottweilers. I've had them in bunches at a time. I've also had other pets too. Not all at once, but right now I currently have 3 Rottweilers. But we usually keep a pack. They're really, we have the space for it, which is great. They like to work together. But their interactions are incredible. And there's one that comes to mind with a previous pack we had. We had Nidon and Sandan, but I'll call her San and Ni for the sake of ease. And Sandan was a very smart girl. Like, she was probably our smartest dog we've ever had. And Nidon was probably our least bright pup. We loved her all the same. But we figured out that Sandan did something bizarre. We had a crate, for them to sit in. It was open. It wasn't like a closed, but it had like a bed. It was comfortable. It happened to be a cold night, and Ni was in there. And she was just cuddled up, and Sandan wanted in. But how did she get her out? We have bells at our back door that our dogs ring, so that way they alert us they can be outside. We open the door. And Sandan decided, I got a plan. She trots on over to the bells. She rings them. Ni thinks, we're going outside, and gets up, runs out of the crate. Sandan booms in there and sits down. So to see that in action was incredible because she had the cognitive function to say, I want to sit in here, but she's in there.
Right.
If I ring these bells, she knows we're leaving. So she rang them and then took the crate. So I don't know. I think that's one of the first memories. I have many fond memories, but that's one that just, it's like, wow.
That's a good one. That's a good one. How about you, Pat?
When I was growing up, we had a cat and a dog, Watson and Alice, and they were very good friends. We had another cat with us for a little bit who my mom rescued from the wheel of a car. It was like we were parked and it was like running around and it went on top of the wheel, and then she went and scooped it up. And he was a very peculiar cat who would sleep in puddles and do things that implied that there was something maybe wrong with his brain a little bit. And he did get killed by a car a couple years later, which was sad, but we gave him a couple extra years. And then Watson and Alice were my pets growing up, and anytime that I was in school and it was like draw a picture of your family, I would always add Watson and Alice into it. And if I was going to be like drawing a picture where there's a family, I would always add a cat and a dog because they were just always around from my earliest memories. So in that sense, I'm one among the people who would describe them as a member of the family. Not that I thought of them as like my siblings by any means, but they were inside kind of a part of the social fabric in a certain sense because it's like, I'm done with this. Oh, here, Watson, you want this? And then you give them like the little leftovers of it. And and then I wouldn't say that the one job I would say that Watson had, he wasn't very big. I mean, he was like 20 pounds. But he sounded very loud and scary when he would bark, and he was very, very protective. So if there was a moment where
So
other people
strong
weren't
baritone.
around, so there was a sense of safety of just like, we're gone, your brother's over here. Oh, but Watson's there, and he'll
Right.
protect you, and he'll bark if there's something coming.
That is really
I love how
sweet.
your 20-pound pet is willing to defend your household, and I have 100-pound Rottweiler beasts, and one cries if his sister's in the doorway because she won't let him out, and he's afraid to go by her. He will whine. So I don't have guard dogs. Don't try and rob me; you'll win.
Watson and Alice both died when I was like in teenage years, and then from my late teens to early 30s, I had another dog named Peace.
Peace, like Peace.
Yeah, that was her name. She had been given one of those chips, and so they contacted, and they couldn't.
Right.
The people didn't really. Whatever happened, they didn't come back for her. They didn't want her, and it was like, oh, okay. So she was a little 25-pound terrier mix, and her name was already Peace, and it seemed to work, and she seemed to
Right.
respond to it. And I was like, oh, well, cool. That's your name. I'm going to keep calling you by your name. And I am not really great at naming, anyways. So, and yeah, I was very, very close with her, and. I don't know. Most of my life, I've just been around dogs to the extent that it just feels very normal and natural for me. And cats. I'm mildly allergic to cats, which makes it slightly more like I
Challenging.
probably wouldn't have a cat as an adult, mainly for that reason. But
Right.
when I'm around them, I like to. If they're a snuggly cat, I do like getting all snuggly with them. I just have to go and change my shirt and wash my hands really thoroughly after, or if my nose runs for a bit.
Pat's petting a cat. Oh my goodness, you're so adorable.
Yeah, that's happened to me.
No, that's I would do that.
I just can't really handle the times, when they go up in your face. Like if you're kind of laying with your head back
Right.
enough and they just for some reason want to lay on like your shoulder and like chest area. Yeah.
I'll
So
make a
they're
bowl.
small for you.
Yes. Yeah. Mel, your cat is so which fortunately did not do that to me, but I was just like,
Oh,
oh
he
yeah,
does it to
if
me.
I was I was like, I hope that glad that I'm not in that position because that would be too much for me.
This sounds
Yeah.
dramatic, but I don't care if I'd break out into hives and my skin would set on fire. If something cuddles up next to my face, I will let it. I'm like, okay.
Yeah. So I love my cat and I enjoy that he is affectionate. However, there are limits to how much I can be affectionate with him. In that, like, a couple of times I got overly enthusiastic and I like buried my face in his fur and I had immediate regrets.
Yep.
Itchy face. It was just a horrible, horrible mistake. So, he can be close to me but I can't put my face in the fur. That's just
It gets too. It
it's
gets
a bad
too prickly.
idea.
Good in theory, good on paper,
Yeah.
not an execution.
So this is interesting to me that people will sign up for suffering in lieu of living with a pet. Basically, once you have a pet and you're immediately invested in them, that's really interesting to me. You guys want to share? Like, have you ever thought about it? What makes you feel that way and give you that kind of a connection with somebody that you cannot communicate with at the same level as your own species?
I think that's part of the appeal. I do think that, I like looking into the history of like dogs and humans because it's so ancient that like we're effectively species that, or at least for dogs anyways, they evolved like next to us and from wolves. And
I
there's
have a
this-
different take on that evolution. They didn't do it
Ooh.
out of their free will. So we'll save that
But
dark bit
it
for a bit
happened-
later.
But it happened such a long, long time ago that it's outside of the context of modern civilizations that we have history for.
We are in agreement there.
And so there is a certain sense, like there's a lot of species of animal, like, when you're with a dog, you can just like point to something and they'll look over like, oh, what are you trying to show me? Because they
Right.
just know that. They have muscles that allow them to put their eyebrows essentially into facial expressions that a human could recognize. And these are muscles that wolves do not have and that serve no practical purpose other than the ability to look sad or look hopeful or look in a way that we would look at it and say, oh, you're expressing this to me.
So communication is something that you feel creates that greater connection.
Yeah, and I think that in some cases with animals, it's kind of, I mean, and maybe this is just
So
me,
are we saying that the non-verbal and the body language communication feels more genuine and unfiltered versus verbal communication?
Yeah, it's simple. It's kind of like
that
if you can express sadness to a dog and they will notice that, and there's no need to explain anything or like, oh, well, I don't know if you understand this, or I don't know what you're going to think of me, etc., because that's not really happening. You're only really, and you need that too. It's just every type of dynamic and relationship has a different benefit to it. But I think the simplicity of interacting with an animal that is that you can have a certain level of emotional connection with, but that is just on the most raw, simple level is a very, because it's not really so much filling a void. It's its own type of communication that you kind of inherently, to me, it's almost like I'm so burdened by my thoughts and like what I want to communicate with somebody else and whether or not they understand it. And it's like sometimes there's a more raw emotional thing of happiness, sadness, and it's nice to communicate on a level where you know that that's the only thing that you're sharing in that moment is just kind of that just feelings.
So the whole idea of keeping it to very nursery emotions, if I may use that word, rather than the more adult, complicated, nuanced, second level emotions, or having to dissect and really analyze what you're feeling and why, that's the appeal.
I also think there's an appeal in a way of, I was trying to think of a word for this, but the way I can express it in a short manner is no games. And by that I mean there's that raw connection where you're missing the buffer, the filter. For example, let's say I'm living with somebody, I'll say a partner, and they're going to leave for the day, and I want them to stay. Now, some people could be direct, or you could say, hey, where are you going? Oh, I'm going to run some errands. Oh, really? All right. Yeah, I'm just going to be hanging out here, or hiding that. If I leave my house, my dog does not want me to leave, they are jumping in front of the door. They're sitting, nope, I want you home. They'll cry, they'll roll on their back. I think that part of the communication with dogs is that there is no buffer for sake of feelings, no buffer for sake of, I don't want to upset somebody or say something off. If a dog is upset, they will let you know. If a dog is happy, they will let you know. There is no guessing games of, oh, did I just say something that upset somebody?
Here's my
it's
question.
Raw.
How many of you would like a boyfriend or a girlfriend who behaves exactly like your pet?
I mean,
Which
now I'm fascinated because I'm trying to picture what that would look like.
It would look very clingy and annoying.
My boy dog cries a lot. Like, just for no reason. He'll just, it's like, all right. But
how does that make you feel if every time you're walking in and out, somebody is doing that to you?
Well, I think that the issue with my boy dog is that he has no other way to communicate. He's very smart, and so he vocalizes to get your attention. The thing that I would like in a partner is that rawness, though. So if I'm looking at a guy to be with, I would want that transparency of, hey, I'm upset. I'm going to tell you why. Something's bothering me. I'm going to let you know. Now, would I want a man to sit beside me and just for hours? Maybe not. But I think the idea of if my dog could talk, maybe it would be a little bit more nuanced than screeching and like looking at me like, please turn on the TV. I want to watch TV. But I think there's admirable parts of it.
It's a hard question for me to answer because also when I'm thinking about it, I'm like, it depends on the dog. Because I think animals vary in personality.
So do humans. But
but when you say a partner, it's like the idea of that person being very clingy. It's like some animals are more clingy than others, and some are actually very independent.
Yeah. So that's why we started with what do you like and appreciate the most about that whole interaction with the pets? You guys told me what you appreciate about it.
I see. Yeah.
I didn't pick it up for you.
So you're saying of the qualities...
Yes, that you say you admire in your pet, and therefore they are family, and therefore you think that it's a closer connection. I'm asking the question, if a human was to behave the same way, would you have the same level of appreciation for them as your pet?
Yeah, so for me, I guess it's honesty. I like that my pets are honest, and when they're upset or when they're happy, they display that. So yeah, I think honesty is a quality that I would like in a partner. That rawness. I don't ever like to guess if someone likes something or not. I like just being truthful, and I think that that's something that pets really don't have the sense to hide. But maybe that goes to why people are getting pets, because maybe when they connect with a pet in a strange way, that is a quality they'd like to see in someone they choose to live with. I don't know if that's kind of the roundabout way of getting to the point you're making.
I'm not making any point. I'm just trying to get Americanized.
I gotta Americanize you.
A different take a little bit on this. Like, initially it was framed as partner, right? And so I think, at least for me, that word implies some level of equality that just simply isn't possible with a pet.
Yeah.
However,
bingo.
However, children, especially small children, require quite a lot, and I think the parallels are not that far between a pet and a small child. And in fact, the small child is probably more demanding.
Yeah.
You know, there's no telling, how much baby poop a parent cleans up in a day.
Yeah.
As opposed to a dog who might be, walked a couple of times a day. Or a cat who can go by themselves, right? And so I certainly would not want my adult romantic partner to behave like a child.
That's true too. I would like to clarify, I do not want my adult partner to behave like a child. But no, that's actually a really good point. And I wonder though, if that's where the line is drawn as far as, what were you saying, like equality of respect, where
right.
Once you get that thought process and are able to articulate beyond, I'm hungry, I'm tired, I'm bored, that's when things get more inherently complicated. And I don't know where I was going with that, but
that's what I like with, as far as pets, it's a very specific relationship that is different from something else. So it's like, to me, I would not, like, a connection with a pet for me is just a very specific type of connection that is not really, partly for reasons mentioned, not really directly comparable to anything else. So I wouldn't be using, I guess, a relationship with a pet to fill any other kind of place or void. It just is something in and of itself, in the same way that, like, I'm not watching a movie to fill the void of not reading a book. They're just two different things that I like to do that are each their own experiences.
Can I pose a question that was on my mind from the start of our conversation? Because I think this might help us articulate more the feeling of pet and the place of pets in a modern world, which is, what defines family? Because a lot of people do say pets are like family to me. And then some people say, well, I wouldn't consider pets family. But I think if we open up what is a family member? What do you consider a family member? For some people, it's blood. For some people, it's how often you're with somebody. For some people, it's the connection. How would we all define family in a condensed
I will
sense?
take that.
Yeah.
Because I want to approach it from a legal definitions perspective. You cannot fly with your pet. They're not permitted in most public areas. Little children will cause more damage to a hotel room than a well-trained pet, but a child is permitted and a pet isn't, right? And your health insurance does not cover pets. So legally speaking, yes, they are like family. The expression in itself, for me, expresses that there is a distinction between family. You're not even choosing and questioning who your family is. That is your inheritance. Whereas a pet is, even though it's someone you've chosen to invite into your family, so by definition, it should be like having a child. Most people nowadays, they plan for a child, right? But child is family. Pets are like family. And I think there in itself, within that expression, we have acknowledged that there is a clear distinction and pets are lesser than family.
You know what I wonder, though? I do have a different perspective on this, and this is mainly because of my family unit. I don't have a nuclear family. My stepfather came into my life when I was 10. So my mother married him in 2009, and his family became part of my family. And I think that some conversation I've had years and years and years over and over again is the concept of family and chosen family. And I obviously legally on paper, he married my mother. He is my stepfather. But the people I spend the most time with and connect with deeper, who I didn't even know for my whole life, are my family. I have my extended family on his side that when I think of my aunt and uncle, that's who I'm thinking of, not my biological father's, sisters, and my mother doesn't have any siblings, but not to say I don't love them. Of course, my aunt on my father's side, I text her on holidays. I want to reconnect with her. It's been so long, but the people I see like every other week are my stepfather's family. And yeah, I know like pets are obviously vastly different from humans in the regard of communication skills, of legalities of marriage and family. But there's plenty of people in my life that I would consider more family that have no relational ties or blood ties to me that I see as, say, an aunt. I know a coworker from my family business. I think of her as like an aunt to me, but there are people who I am blood related to and are bound by family law biologically that I know nothing about. And so that's why I wonder if the phrase like family can kind of be brought upon into fruition because like family becomes family. I don't know if that makes sense.
I think that in American culture, and there are probably profit-driven reasons for this, let's say, that the word family in American culture is meant to provoke positive emotions or a positive connotation is assumed when the reality for many people is the family unit or non-unit they were born into is dysfunctional and unhealthy and does not, in fact, bring up positive emotions.
That's a global unifier. I would like to point that out. I think in America, people are more open about acknowledging it. Whereas the rest of the world, there's more emphasis on tolerance and just sometimes brushing it under the carpet.
Because that's your father, that's your mother. You need to respect them, kind of.
There's just so many nuances to it that it'll be a podcast in and of itself.
Right, but I do think this ties. I do think it's important to at least lay out some of the definitions of family.
Right. No, you're right.
And the feelings that are and connotations that word brings. And I think especially in the commercial space in the U.S., that word is and those relationships are meant to evoke something positive. Like, and I'm specifically thinking about like the litany of commercials about some food product, like just like mom used to make.
Right.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And it's, and that assumes that you had a house for someone that you call your mother to cook in and that she was cooking for you.
Right. She had the time to cook for you.
Right. So I think that like family is meant to be like, like someone you love and feel obligated to.
Right.
Where that relationship might come with
intrinsic motivations.
That's right. Intrinsic motivations such that the work that's required for that relationship is not seen as overly burdensome.
Yeah, that's true too. So actually the comparison of
where
saying our
service
pets like
brings
family,
you joy.
Yeah. So if the whole thing with pets is are pets like family, that's why I pose a question of what is family? Because pets may not be family technically, but do they hold higher meaning than someone who is in that regard? For people who maybe didn't have a connection with their family or didn't have that option,
So if we are using the definition that the intrinsic motivation and where service brings us joy, that's where we start defining it as our family. Now my question to my fellow panelists is, oh my God, I can see Faith just dreading it.
No, I love this.
What service does the pet provide? Because from my perspective, it takes a lot more like, we give a lot more in terms of the checklist of items versus what we get back. And I will share with you, I know it sounds like a very jarring point of view right now, but I have a pet and I have analyzed this for myself, and I have had some self-realization, which I will save for the conclusion. I don't want to seed the idea and sort of bias the discussion one way or the other. So we'll go around the table, Mel, Pat, and then Faith.
Sorry, what is your question?
If the definition of family is the people for whom we feel intrinsically motivated and that sense of selfless service, then what is it about pets that makes them family? Because they are not providing that service to us. We are the ones providing the service.
Yeah, so I think many of us, I'll speak for myself, need an affectionate outlet. I am a single person. I am uncoupled, have been that way for my entire adult life, well, with the exception of a little bit of time, if you mash it all together and add it up. But vast majority of my life, I have been a single adult. That does not mean I don't have the desire to give affection. And I think for many of us, pets are a safe way to express that. I will never give birth. That is a thing I choose. But that doesn't mean that I don't care for people and that I don't have the desire to care. I think a thing that makes human relationships complicated is you're not always free to fully express yourself.
That's a great point. That's a great point.
And, I could do something my cat doesn't like, right? It's like, oh, maybe he doesn't feel like getting scratched behind his ear today. That day never comes, but let's just say. But I am not shamed in any way for showing my cat affection in the way that I might be shamed for showing someone that I might even be in a romantic relationship with. Let's say we talked about this fictional boyfriend or a partner or whatever that, you might be inhibited by saying, I really don't want you to go right now.
Right. There are always terms of engagement.
Yeah. And, potential for misunderstanding and hurt. And, my cat has never hurt me emotionally.
Yeah.
Has he scratched the fuck out of me sometimes? Yes. But my cat is never going to break my heart. My cat is never going to reject me the way a human being can.
That's an excellent point. Pat?
So rephrasing the question, it's like, what do I get? What do I get personally from a relationship with an animal?
Do you even have expectations? Have you ever evaluated it that way?
To an extent, no, because I just was always so close to the animals growing up that I just never. It's like it's a certain sort of thing that was just kind of I didn't think about too much because it was just always there.
Like a grandparent, it's just that's who you grew up with, and you don't question it.
But I would definitely, I think, echo pretty much everything that Mel said. I would also, agree with, feel the same way. I don't know. I enjoy taking care of animals, and I don't find it to be an amount of work that is particularly taxing. It's like I enjoy being able to be like nurturing, but it's an incredibly easy, in terms of comparatively. I mean, I love walking a dog because I walk all the time anyways, and I just enjoy that, and I like playing with dogs. So it's when you have an animal that might be nervous or you need to like arrange for places for this animal to go if you're going to be gone for a while, that can be challenging to some extent. But ultimately, I feel like I get way more out of it than I give, I guess.
That's wonderful. Faith.
So I'm probably the furthest extreme here, if I were to guess, at this table. So to preface, my parents have owned a dog grooming shop for longer than I've been alive. So I actually help out there.
Clearly biased.
So very biased, I will say. So much bias, it's not even funny. But I have grown up around hundreds of dogs, and I still see them. Like I see probably about 100 dogs a week, not including my own. I've never lived a day in my house with at least one dog in there. I love my pets. That's the first thing I put on like every social media, dating profile, anything is like, you got to like pets. But let me tell you, Avantika, I have conversations with my family because I live with my family about, we'll say it in a joking manner, but we'll look at our pups on the floor, all 300 pounds of them because they're massive Rottweilers. And we will say, what do they do? Like, do they pay the bills? Do they have jobs? No. Let's see. Well, they do help us cook. No, we actually have to get food for them. But they do help clean up the house. No, they shred toys and leave messes on the house. And but they have great conversation. No, they don't do that either.
Right.
And we go down the list of, for lack of a better word, how useless they are in that context. But then we come around, and to roundabout way of answering your question is, it really is emotional factors. And I think that in life, people have such a weight on things that are tangible, that they can see, that they can understand. You need a house to live in. You need sustenance and food and things in front of you. But something that doesn't have as much accountability, but that is getting some traction now, is mental health. You can have everything physically, but if you're not in a good state of mind, if you're not feeling reciprocal love, selflessness of love from a pet, then what are we? We're shells of beings walking through life. And so I think that my joy of pets is strictly emotional. There is no physical benefit. I remember when I had my boy puppy, he had like a couple medical issues, and he would pee 8 times a day in an hour in the house, and I would have to mop it up. He would make a mess with the bowl. Things are shredded, furniture's ruined. Like you said, getting scratched and no tomorrow. But it's worth it because of how we feel when we're with them. For me, it's the joy I see when I walk into my house and my boy puppy lays on his back and puts his paws in the air. He's like, pet me. Or like when you get them a toy and they get so excited. I think it's just that unfiltered happiness and seeing something so genuine and innocent, knowing that our lives, these dogs' lives depend on us. I often think too, if I wanted to right now, I could put my dogs outside in a tiny little crate and leave them there all day. I could not feed them if I wanted to. Their lives are entirely dependent on us.
So that
and to see
sense of purpose.
Yeah, and to know that even still, 2 of my girls are adopted from, they were kennel dogs. So they were in Pennsylvania. They were put into little chicken coops with chicken wire, 6 inches on each side, just birthing puppies. They were treated worse than cattle. And to know that they were hit, that they were abused, and they still will come into your lap and sit there and want to be petted. Right. It shows how forgiving they are.
Their resilience.
And they need love, and that we give it too. And it's so heartbreaking but admirable to see that they could get hit by somebody 1 minute and then sit in your lap and still want that love. I don't hit I'm saying for abusers out there, but it's so selfless, and you want nothing more than to just give them that. And that's why I love them.
I think the dark side of that, though, was shown to us in the pandemic.
Yeah.
Where people, adopted animals for selfish reasons and then gave them back when they felt like they were done with them.
Oh, we've seen it because we have the dog grooming shop. There was a boom. Our business was one of the businesses during the pandemic that thrived, that we still now have a surplus of clients. We are turning people away day by day because everyone got puppies during the pandemic. But there's so many people who went, oh, cute, something to do. And then they return to work. And then it's, oh, well, I'm just going to, what do I do with it? Oh, I'll put it in a crate for 8 hours. Or, oh, God, I have to spend more money on it. There's medical bills. So, yeah, that is a dark side that we have seen, unfortunately, where people forget there is effort to be put into it. And if they're not reaping the benefits of that emotional feeling from it, then there's no purpose for them to have pets. And I'll be the person to say it. Don't have pets if you don't want to take care of them. Because they are technically legally property. But you can't just let them waste away in like a little small box and throw food at them once in a while. They are an investment, emotionally, physically, monetarily.
So monetarily, actually, cost over life is $8,000 to $13,000. So if you compare it to any other relationship in your life, that will last for, let's say, an average of 12 years. Apart from your parents, I think this relationship is the cheapest relationship you can have. I mean, parents, they will the good parents will always give you, and the bad parents, unfortunately, you have zero relationship with them, right? So the sum total comes to lower than 8K, in my opinion, whether it's good or bad, right? Both ways.
I think it's balanced, or I think it can be, depending on, obviously, your relationship and how long they live.
Yeah.
So initially, right, your parents are taking care of you, but if they live a long time and you live a long time, you might, have to take care of them. So I think the monetary argument is highly variable depending on
what I'm saying
lifetime
is,
and
in terms of
trajectory.
what they gave you, right? So if you feel that obligated and that connected to your parents that you want to take care of them, it's highly likely that they invested just as much, if not monetarily.
Oh,
emotionally
yes,
balanced.
of course. I just meant that if you were looking at it strictly by numbers, I'm not
No.
sure how it would shake out.
I mean, talk about inflation, right? There's
Yeah.
Oh, here it is.
how are we ever going to
4
compare?
episodes in.
So, in that sense, yeah. But
There's pet insurance now. I have pet insurance.
it's very useless and extremely expensive.
The thing is,
There's nothing more I have to say about
I will say my one argument, it is extremely useless because you don't know what your pet's going to have. It is very helpful when your pet has something, but there are so many rules. I'm telling you, it's like, oh, my pet has a congenital heart issue. I want to put them on insurance. And insurance says no, because we know that you're going to need money from
Yeah,
us.
pre-existing condition.
Yeah, so
just
you
like
need
for
to-
people.
There's some people, it's so tragic, where they sign up their pet on pet insurance, and let's say they have a torn ACL or something. They wait the 6-month period to let them know so that way they can get covered. I'm like, that's terrible.
I will
But
say
yeah.
one thing, though. The most admirable thing about pet ownership in America to me is the dignity with which most animals are treated. We joke about it all the time. As a Hindu, we talk about, do the right deeds so that you have a better life next time. And for me, the highest form of life before nirvana is to be born a pet in New England.
Yeah, no, it's it's true.
You're just lounging on the couch. People are second guessing what kind of, there's like cupcakes and cookies for you. But the dignity of death is what I admire the most. You don't suffer, you're not a liability, and when it's too hard for you to sustain and support your own self, there's a dignified death. To me, that's the most admirable part about pet ownership in America, and I am an advocate for allowing for those rights for humans as well.
Pets in New England is such a way to live.
It's
I could
the
tell
ultimate
you
life. It's
stories
spa day
on-
every day.
There are people who from the dog grooming salon, I'll bring them outside to their vehicles. We have a pick up and drop off. There is one who has a tufted ottoman stool to step up into the car. There's some where I open the passenger door. There is a pillow and blanket set up, and there are 3 treats perfectly arranged in the center. And they go, okay, Pookie. And then they put them in. Somebody got a pup cup from their pup because they said, oh, I feel like they'd be stressed with the appointment. I'm like, they're just getting a bath.
Yeah.
But I've seen coats, I've seen jackets, I've seen everything. It's luxury. I'm like, some pets live better than some kids. It's
Most
bizarre.
pets,
Many,
most
yeah.
pets live better than their owners, or parents, as we want to call them.
I'm sorry.
Parents.
I haven't heard that. I've heard fur baby, but not
babies.
parents.
PAW, paw.
Parents.
Yeah. Parents. Yeah. no.
Parents. I haven't heard parents before.
Well,
I've
that's
heard
it.
godfather.
That's it. We should hashtag it. And
Hashtag. Oh no, it's
We
grandfather.
should patent it.
I already have the rights to it. Anytime you say it, that's 5 cents towards my
Yes.
my college fund.
So, but I think that's a non-trivial thing. I do get concerned that there sometimes seems to be an empathy for animals that often does not exist for other human beings,
That's tragic.
even if those human beings are children
Right.
who by default did not choose to be here.
Exactly.
Yeah. No, that's something to be said.
Exactly.
I love kids just as much as I love pets, and it is heartbreaking sometimes when you see a kid in a situation. And it's great when you see a pet that is treated like royalty, and then you see a kid who's like, their parent doesn't even know, their favorite food or just basic emotional and physical needs. But you're right. I think in a way too, the way we treat pets is kind of the way we should treat people with in lieu of the who's a good boy, more so
I think
the
this is the
forgiveness.
reason why, and feel free to, correct me or add more context to it. So my very first pet was when I was 4 years old, and it was a wild fawn. I called it Pinku the deer. Because it had like 2 little pink blobs on its forehead as the antlers were pushing through. And my parents would welcome it in our backyard. And Pinku's favorite food was all vegetable waste, especially shelled pea pods. And people think I'm just making it up, but I have a photograph from my childhood to prove it.
Oh my God, I love it.
So, but obviously this animal never lived with us, and it was a visitor, and every time it visited, I was excited, and, I valued and cherished that raw interaction. Obviously, as a child, I wanted pets. I grew up with a lot of goldfish, like you pointed out. They don't particularly do well in bowls, and they die off very quickly. And I think the reason why most parents encourage and sign up for that, apart from the fact that it's the easiest pet to own, is because it is a very quick and also an extremely soft lesson when it comes to introducing children to the concept of personal loss.
Yeah, that's a big part of it.
The whole act of, you discover your pet has passed on, and you flush it, or whatever you may choose to do with that fish, right? You go through that entire cycle of mourning and funeral in a way, right? For a child, that is as close as it gets to understanding what holding a funeral would be. I think it has its value there. I still am not a dog or a cat person. I'm not scared of them. I will interact with them if they are around me. But I too became one of those pandemic parents.
Pandemic parents, there we go. It's on a t-shirt now. We own it.
Yes, we own it. And this was my deepest realization. Yes, they are extreme amount of work. And you have to understand how to communicate at a completely different level. The nonverbal cues aren't just from the pet. You have to learn, how they interact, and be able to cue them on in your own way as well in order to form that relationship. But what I realized was that it is a very simple process, and you can predict the outcome every single time. With human interactions, the same exact act or expression is not going to produce the same exact reaction every single time. And it is that consistency which translates to comfort for us. It's like knowing every single time you eat a brownie, you'll feel like the world is a better place.
Yeah, no, that's kind of what were we saying earlier? Something akin to that, where there's no games involved. There's no questioning. Here is what it is.
Oh, they are smart.
Yeah.
I think they are manipulative.
They can be.
They are. I mean, and you shared a really good anecdote about that as well, right? They are smart. They will latch on to your patterns. Everyone wants to be alpha, right? Especially with dogs. They're pack animals. They want to be that alpha. And there will be that power dynamics. Even if they're 4 humans, they will pick their alpha, and they have a different relationship and a different behavioral pattern with every single person. But the predictability of that pattern every single time, I think, that is extremely comforting. And the other thing, that these are all primary emotions, nursery emotions. You don't have to get into the nuances, like Pat pointed out. I don't have to explain to my dog why I'm angry or upset. If I want to just veg out on the couch, that pet is still going to sit next to me and, just cuddle. Yes, they may want to walk. They may come with a rope or a ball that they want to play, right? But you know exactly what they're there for. You throw the ball a couple of times, you wear them out, and now it's done. They're not going to ask you, so what are you thinking? And I think that is the question. and here's why I think most humans avoid it, because they haven't spent the time to process their own thoughts. And that's why that question comes across as nagging.
So the question of, sorry, can you clarify?
If you could articulate
Yeah.
exactly what you were feeling, why, and the worry that it's instilling in you, that translates to closure. And if you have closure, you're not irritable and you don't want to be quiet. You can talk about it.
Yeah, that's actually a good point. I think there's also I don't even know if this has been around or if this is a newer thing. People feel to put down the idea of doing things because it makes you feel nice. Like, for example, when there's skeptics with pets who say, well, why do you have them? They're a lot of work and they don't do anything for you. It's like, oh, because I like them. It's like, oh, really? You feel good about like feeding an animal? And it's like, really?
I don't think so, yes.
Yeah, I think that's a good thing.
Purpose.
Yeah, and I think that's something that should be vastly more accepted and something that doesn't need to be analyzed further too much so where it's like, oh, they make me happy. And I'm not saying everybody, but there are skeptics out there who will be belligerent with it, or well, what's the point of that? Or I've seen family dynamics where some person's like, I really want a cat, and one person goes, why do you want a cat? Really, what's it going to do? And it makes you happy. It's like I don't know if anyone else has seen that too. Maybe it's because I've seen
it's kind of like tending a garden of plants that you can't eat.
Yeah, that's true too. It's just, it makes you feel good, and I think that that's something that we should all do more.
The argument that you posed isn't about misalignment of understanding what the cat does, but it comes from the fact that it's a shared responsibility.
That's true.
You're bringing it into a common space.
Yeah,
it's not just your cat.
Yeah, no, I see what you're saying as far as if you're with somebody. I should have articulated. I'm talking people who do not live together. People who...
I see.
It's more just conversationally.
Why are you talking to them about your choices?
That's what I'm wondering.
Don't seek permission.
No, because I've had a few. Maybe it's because of the industry that I'm into, with the dog grooming as well, where you'll chat with somebody about it, and then they'll ask questions like, "Oh, why have them? Why?" What's the point of it? People who don't understand it. It's kind of the phrase of, what's that modern phrase? The girls who get it, and those who don't. I think that's just kind of a summary.
I also think there's a cultural piece to it as well. And maybe this is not unique to the United States, but, everything being tied to, some financial or functional purpose. And that's what gets you to the place where you only teach math and science in school. You don't teach literature. You don't teach history. You don't teach art, and where these things are not valued in society and not valued in the economy. It's a very similar logic.
No, that makes sense. It's the same argument. As someone who is an English major, I have a degree in creative writing and literature as well as English. I love the argument of, oh, well, what are you going to do with that? That's useless, blah, blah, blah. And then these people go home and watch a movie, or they read a book. Or it's like, well, the time you spend not complaining about people with those degrees, you fill your time with people who went and did something with that. So, or just in general, like writers and entertainers, and there needs to be more of an uplifting of things that make you feel good, things that just help you escape for a moment, things that help you have an emotional outlet, even for a bit of time or for a couple of years. So there's much to be said about, at least in the States. I don't know if it spans beyond, probably to some degree, but the functionality.
I haven't ever lived anywhere else, so
same.
I can't speak to what's happening in other places. Really, I've visited other places. Like one of the most beautiful places I've had the opportunity to go is Oaxaca, Mexico.
Oh wow!
Very rich culture, a lot of artists and artisans, a long history of protest and revolution. The state of Oaxaca has the largest indigenous population in the country of Mexico, and so you get, that presence in history as well. And I think one of the biggest differences I experienced, again, this is, as a visitor, not as a resident, was just the sort of richness of life and the sort of relative unhurriedness.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that luxury, that culture. And I can say, at least this I do know with American culture, and I think we talked about this on another podcast, so I'll reiterate
Place for pause.
Place for pause.
Yeah.
All right, do you watch it? Great. Thank you for watching the other episodes. It really helps our revenue.
We keep coming up with these podcast names every single time.
There was one topic we had where I forgot how it was brought up, but one thing that's
New
bizarre.
Year resolutions.
That's what it was. Thank you. But American culture, you get a coffee and you get in your car and you drive off and you drink it. You're walking, you take a sip of it. Over, at least in Europe, that's not something that's too common. You go to a coffee shop, you sit down, you enjoy it. Or if you whether it's there at the shop or you go somewhere and then you sit there, people don't walk around chugging their coffees or eating things quickly as they're moving. And I know America here is very it tries to be efficient to the point where, you can eat on the go. They have now the little the chicken nugget sauce containers that sit in your car. I don't know if you've seen those.
I haven't. To date, I cannot do a working lunch.
Yeah, I do working lunches all the time, and that's something that has become a norm for me. I'll get my order, I'll get it delivered, or
I
I'll get
will
something
never
instead.
remember what I ate and what it tasted like
Yeah.
if I'm doing a working lunch.
It's a
I have
horrible
no
trait.
idea. There's just,
But that's not the point. The point is to eat enough food so you stay alive to keep working.
But that's not the
Exactly.
point of food. If it's about true sustenance, right? And the reason, and that's the point about that affectionate outlet and being able to express yourself freely and fully, like you all pointed out. What the pets make us do is put everything else down, and our entire focus is on them. So in that sense, I think what they do is make that meditative state accessible for us.
It's surviving versus thriving. It's necessity versus luxury.
And that's
So
why
they're both
for
valid.
us, it's distilled down to those primary emotions, because everything secondary, we are able to look past and say, what is it that I truly feel right now? It's either sad, it's happy, or, anger. And the answer to all of that is to just maybe have a cuddle with the pet or take them out for a walk, or, they encourage us to take on more physical activity. I think that is the true value that we should be drawing from this relationship. And that's been my learning, because for me, the biggest pain point of coming to terms with pet ownership has been that they never outlive you, and they'll always be like a toddler. They never grow beyond that point. The simplest and the sweetest thing is that they don't question you. I mean, there's a reason why even toddlers are called the terrible twos, right?
Oh,
the
terrible
moment
twos.
the intellect comes in a human interaction, we find that uncomfortable, which to me is the most bizarre thing. What truly connects us, what makes us individuals and valuable to any community is our individuality, our intellect, and yet that is the thing that is always the hindrance in making true connections. That is what we always run away from, and that is the piece that a pet will never cross over. That threshold will never be reached.
Did you ever see Best in Show?
I did.
What is Best in Show?
Oh my
It's a
god!
satire about
Oh, it's
like
perfect.
Of dog shows.
yeah, like
Oh, like
Westminster
with-
Dog
Yeah.
Show.
So there's a couple. There's a very neurotic couple who has a dog, and part of the funny thing is they're with their therapist.
The
and they're
funniest thing
she's
is,
being very passive aggressive, and it was very hurtful to me. And they're talking about the dog.
and the funniest thing is, I own a Weimaraner.
Oh my God.
That is the breed of the dog that they. Go ahead.
Well, no, I was just thinking this conversation about pets is surprisingly, a pretty direct line to some fundamental philosophical questions, right?
That's what we do here.
Hell.
Right. Like, so we've talked about sort of what is family, what is the return on investment for
Right.
pets. And I think a fairly direct line for me is, what is the purpose of love?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right?
That's one I don't know if we ever can answer, but we know that we need it. Kind of in a way where, differently actually, back to the food topic, we need to eat. Why? Because our organs shut down, we die. Do we need love? Yeah. Why? We won't die without it, right? Like, it's not or will we? Because people can die of heartbreak.
I think it's more direct than that. And, love and touch are not the same. Let me be clear about that.
Yeah, different.
However, babies, if they do not get held, they suffer physically.
Yeah. Exactly.
And so I do think, in ways that we maybe don't fully understand, having growing, throughout our lives with access to love and safety helps us.
Mm. And once again, it's not a tangible fact. You can't you can't see the effects of the brain chemicals interacting certain ways.
You can't, but you can certainly see the effects of unloved people.
That's true too. But once again, I always bring up this argument of, if somebody has a broken arm and says, hey, I need some help with my arm. Oh, why? Oh, it's broken. Can you see right here, the bones? Oh, yeah, we see that. Where versus if someone's like, I'm lonely. You can see it in how a person acts or what they say. It's hard for people to grasp that concept.
And people do die of loneliness.
They do, exactly. And so my point is, it's just as important as
because
physical
I think
health.
the degree of loneliness is different for everyone.
Yeah.
Right? Some people may say, oh, that's my comfort zone. Why do you think you're lonely? Just read a book. Right?
But I think there's a difference between being alone and being lonely.
Oh, definitely.
Right?
Yeah, definitely.
So I'm someone who, I mentioned that I've been single for a long time, but I have not, been lonely for most of that time.
Mm-hmm. I agree with that. And that distinction, not everyone is able to make it for themselves.
Exactly.
Or for others, right? They think that, what may be my definition of alone time could be loneliness to someone else.
Yeah, it's all dependent on individual needs. Some people prefer to be with a partner. Some want to have a family. Some find solace in being with themselves. Also, come to think of, when you said reading a book for alone time, in a way, isn't that also not being lonely? Because why do we read stories about people? We get so invested and connected. You ever look up from a book and are kind of in daze because you were so lost in it? We still yearn for that connection, even if it's not something directly happening to us. You like to see the interactions of individuals. People have heartache. People have love. People have promise and success. We still thrive and need that, but maybe not in a direct sense. But you're right. It's individual.
And I think that is why, at the start of the podcast, that's the reason why I was most intrigued by the two metrics: never married and urban dwellers. Over 60% of them consider their pets their family. And to answer your question, this is a global phenomenon in emerging countries as well as in urban communities across the world. And the main reason is that statistically, people who live in urban communities can afford to live there because they have a higher level of education. When you go for higher level of education and prioritize your careers, you put your personal relationships on the back burner, which also translates to a higher percentage of those people falling under the category of never married. So
can I make a really stupid comparison? Hallmark movies. Right? There's always the busy businesswoman who has business to do and business. I don't have time for love. My kid doesn't need Santa Claus. We have bills to pay. And who's the one that wins her over? The dopey guy from the corner who works at the coffee shop, who puts on a Santa hat and beard and climbs into people's windows, and it makes her happy. And she says, against all odds, this is what I need.
Is that a specific plot, or did you make that up?
No, it's very specific. I've never watched a Hallmark movie, but I bet that there's at least 10 movies that match that exact description.
Faith is giving a pitch as we speak.
Yeah, this is the least appealing catcall.
Listen, like I said, I have school bills to pay. If somebody would like to buy that idea, my name is Faith. I work... but it's true.
Well, so I just wanted to quickly go back to... you mentioned like being so absorbed in a book. and also sort of the consequences of having a more educated populace. I've lived these things, right? And so I have devoted vast majority of my life to my education, and I continue to have a life of the mind, right? But I am also at a moment where I am intentionally trying to pursue human connection, which is part of the reason I'm here.
Yeah.
As much as I love my cat, right? And so, and I'm doing this relatively, I'm not elderly, but relatively late in life, compared to somebody who was,
Never too late.
dating in high school and marrying their high school sweetheart. That is not my story. And that's not the story of most of the people I know, because the other people I know are other intellectuals.
Yeah, it really is about, I'll speak to myself too. I just finished up my master's degree as of December. I'll be walking in May, but a lot of that time has been dedicated to schooling. And now I'm kind of in a similar phase to you, Mel, where I'm like, okay, social. How do I do that? And that's why I decided
How do I people?
How people? Hello, people. But no, a lot of time is put into intellectual and educational. I'm a single individual. And so now it's when that moment frees up, it's like, all right, how do I connect with people? Either in a social situation or eventually in a relationship situation, if that is someone's desired outcome. For me, that's a goal. But that balance is interesting, isn't it? And it feels odd. Because I have people I knew from high school who are now married to their high school sweetheart. And I'm like, oh, goodness, I know 10 people. But there's something to be said of that, and there is no right or wrong. It's just it's trajectory of life, and at the end goal is we do need that connection to some degree.
I'm waiting for pearls of wisdom from Pat.
Pat, there's no wisdom with a P, is there? We need to alliterate that.
What do you want? I don't
Wisdom.
know. I don't have anything on my...
Wisdom.
Wisdom with Pat.
Wisdom.
Give us some wisdom.
Well, I made two. This isn't wisdom. This is more just a depressing question. But like Mel had mentioned that sometimes people will show more empathy for animals than to human beings.
Right.
And Avantika, you said that
intellect is offensive.
And I was just and then it was this would be an entirely separate, not entirely separate, but a much broader deep dive topic that I'm not really sure what I would have to contribute to, but it is interesting to think of the ways in which people struggle to empathize or even sympathize sometimes with human beings.
And that's why the next part of this podcast is going to be living with other humans, whether they're your roommates, meaning you just have an extrinsic motivation to be with them, versus living with someone who's a family member or a romantic partner where the intrinsic motivation also comes into play. But I think this
could also be like a review of The Odd Couple or some kind of TV show.
Hey.
I never watched that. But
I think it'll be fun. But I think there's enough that I was able to hopefully, push people to think about that by addressing why we like pets, right? We've realized it's more about our need to fulfill our expression of affection, and the gap between simple emotions versus being in a position where we can scrutinize and articulate our own complex emotions. So that gap is very, very well filled by the affection that the pets give us. And I do think it's an important tool in the society where, you go, you embrace that distraction, you cultivate that relationship so that you come reset back into the more involved and intellectual parts of the engagement that you also need in order to have a holistic human experience.
Beautifully said.
So I think with that, we're going to conclude today's podcast, and we will meet again for discussion about roommates.